Richardson. Whatever research he'd been doing must be damn important. They spent a lot of money covering for the son of a bitch over the past 10 years, and the Pentagon just doesn't do that unless it expects to be repaid in spades someday. Agent. Covering for him? How? Richardson. He likes to mark up prostitutes. Agent. Mark them up? Richardson. Mostly with his fists. Agents. How often does this happen? Richardson. Once or twice a year. Agent. How often does he see prostitutes? Richardson. He goes whoring the first weekend of every other month, regular as you please, like he's a robot or something. You could set your watch by his needs. Usually he goes into Manhattan, makes the rounds of the leisure and health spas, phones a couple of call girls and has them up to his hotel room. Now and then one of them comes along with the kind of look that sets him off and he beats the shit out of her. Agent, what look is that? Richardson, usually blonde, but not always. Usually pale, but not always. But she is always small, 5'1" or 5'2", 100 pounds, and delicate, very delicate features. Agent, why would a girl like that set him off? Richardson, the Pentagon tried to force him into psychoanalysis. He went to one session and refused to go the second time. He had to tell the psychiatrist that these frenzies of his were generated by more than the girl's appearance. They have to be delicate, but not just in a physical sense. They have to seem emotionally vulnerable to him before he gets the urge to pound them senseless. Agent, in other words, if he thinks a woman is his equal or his superior, she's safe. But he feels that he can dominate her. Richardson, then she'd better have her Blue Cross paid in full. Agent, he hasn't killed any of these women, has he? Richardson, not yet, but he's come close a couple of times. Agent, you said someone in the Pentagon covers up for him. Richardson, usually someone from our bureau. Agent, how? Richardson, by paying the girl's hospital bills and giving her a lump sum. The size of the payoffs depends on the extent of her injuries. Agent, is she considered a high security risk? Oh no. If he was a closet queen and we found about it, he'd be classified as a fairly bad risk, but his hang-ups and his vices aren't secret. They're out in the open. No one can blackmail him, threaten him with the loss of his job because we already know all of his dirty little secrets. In fact, whenever he marks up a girl, he has a special number to call. A relay point. Right in my department, someone is at his hotel room within an hour to clean up after him. Agent, nice people you work for, register, aren't they? But I'm surprised that even they put up with his son of a bitch Salisbury. He's a sick man. He's a real can of worms, all by himself. They should stick him away in a cell somewhere and just forget all about him. Agent, you know about his childhood, Richardson, about his mother and the man who raped him. It's in the file. Agent, it helps to explain why he, Richardson, you know what? Even though I can see where his craziness comes from, even though I can see that it isn't entirely his fault that he is what he is, I can't dredge up any compassion for him. When I think about all those girls who ended up in hospital with their jaws broken and their eyes swollen shut, listen, did any of those girls feel less pain because Salisbury's evil isn't entirely his own doing? I'm an old style liberal when it comes to most things, but this liberal line about compassion for the criminal, that's 90% horseshit. You can only spout that kind of garbage if you and your own family have been lucky enough to avoid animals like Salisbury. If it's up to me, I'll put him on trial for all those beatings. Then I'll send him away to a cell somewhere hundreds of miles from the nearest woman. Dawson sighed. He put the reports in the folder and returned the folder to the lower right-hand desk drawer. Oh Lord, he thought prayerfully, give me the power to undo what damage is done in Black River. If this mistake can be remedied, if the field test can be completed properly, then I will be able to feed the drug to both Ernest and Ogden. I'll be able to program them. I've been making preparations, you know that. I'll be able to program them and convert them to your holy fellowship. And not just them, the world. There will be no more souls for Satan, heavens on earth. That's what it'll be, Lord, true heaven on earth, all in the shining light of your love. 2:55 p.m. Sam read the last line of Salisbury's article, closed the book and said, Jesus, at least now we have some idea of what's happening in Black River, Paul said. All of that crazy stuff about breaking down the ego, primer drugs, code phrases, achieving total control, bringing contentment to the masses through behavioural modification, the benefits of a subliminally directed society. Somewhat dazed by Salisbury's rhetoric, Jenny shook her head as if that would help her to think more clearly. He sounds like a lunatic. He's certifiable. He's a Nazi, Sam said, in spirit, if not in name. That's a very special breed of lunatic, a very deadly breed. And there are literally thousands of people like him, hundreds of thousands who would agree with every word he said about the benefits of subliminally directed society. Thunder exploded with such violence that it sounded as if the whole of the sky had cracked in two. A fierce gust of wind slammed against the house. The tempo of the rain on the roofs and windows picked up to double time. Wherever he is, Paul said, he's done exactly what he said could be done. He's made his insane scheme work. By God, that has to be what's happening here. It explains everything since the epidemic of night chills and nausea. I still don't understand why Dad and I weren't afflicted, Jenny said. Salisbury mentions in the article that the subliminal program would not affect illiterates and children who haven't yet come to terms, however crude, with sex and death. But neither Dad nor I fit into one of those categories. I think I can answer that, Paul said. Sam said, so can I. One thing that I teach budding pharmacologists is that no drug affects everyone the same way. On some people, for instance, penicillin has little or no effect. Some people don't respond well at all to sulfur drugs. I suspect that for whatever reasons of genes and metabolisms and body chemistries, we're among the tiny percentage of those who weren't touched by Salisbury's drugs. Thank God for that, Jenny said. She hugged herself and shivered. There ought to be more adults unaffected, Paul said. It's summertime. People take vacations. Wasn't anyone out of town during the week when the reservoir was contaminated and the subliminal messages broadcast? When the heavy snows came, Sam said, logging operations have to stop. So in the warm months, everyone connected with the mill works his butt off to make sure there will be a stockpile of logs to keep the saws going all winter. No one at the mill takes a vacation in the summer, and everyone in town who serves the mill takes his time off in the winter too. Paul felt as if he were on a turntable, whirling around and round. His mind spun with the implication of the article that Sam had read. Mark and Raya and I were affected because we got to town after the contaminant had passed out of the reservoir, and because we didn't watch whatever television program or commercials contained the subliminal messages. But virtually everyone else in Black River is now under Salisbury's control. They stared at one another. The storm moaned at the window. Finally, Sam said, we enjoyed the benefits and luxuries provided by modern science, all the while forgetting that the technological revolution, just like the industrial revolution before it, has its dark side. For several long seconds, with the mantle clock ticking behind him, he studied the cover of the book in his hand. The more complex our society becomes, the more dependent each part of it becomes on every other part of it, the easier it is for one man, one lunatic or true believer, to destroy it all on a whim. One man working alone can assassinate a chief of state and precipitate major changes in his country's foreign and domestic policies. They tell us that one man with a degree in biology and a lot of determination can culture more than enough plague bacillus to destroy the world. One man working alone can even build a nuclear bomb. All he needs is a college degree in physics and the ability to get his hands on a few pounds of plutonium, which isn't so darn hard to do either. He can build a bomb inside a suitcase and wipe out New York City because, well, hell, why not? Because he was mugged there, or because he once got a traffic ticket in Manhattan and he doesn't think he deserved it. But Salisbury can't be working alone, Jenny said. I agree with you. The resources need to perfect and implement the program that he described in his article. Why they would be enormous. A private industry might be able to finance it, Paul said. A company as large as AT&T. No, Sam said. Too many executives and research people would have to know about it. There would be a leak. It would never get this far without a leak to the press and a major scandal. A single wealthy man could provide what Salisbury needed, Jenny said. Someone as rich as Onassis or Hughes. Tugging gently on his beard, Sam said, it's possible, I suppose, but we're all avoiding the most logical explanation that Salisbury is working for the United States government, Paul said worriedly. Exactly, Sam said. And if he's working for the government or the CIA or a branch of the military, then we're finished. Not just the three of us and Raya, but the whole damn country. Paul went to the window, wiped away some of the dew, and stared at wind-lashed trees and billowing grey sheets of rain. Do you think that what's happening here is happening all over the country? No, Sam said. If there were a general takeover in progress, Salisbury wouldn't be in a backwoods mill town. He'd be at a command post in Washington or somewhere else, anywhere else. Then it's a field test, probably. And that's maybe a good sign, Sam said. The government would run a field test where it already had tight security, most likely on an army or an air force base, not here. Lightning blasts through the thunderheads, and for an instant the patterns of rain on the window seemed to form faces, and his face, Mark's face. Suddenly Paul thought that his wife and son, although they had met quite different deaths, had been killed by the same force, technology, science, and he had gone into the hospital for simple appendectomy. It hadn't even been an emergency operation. The anesthetist had given her a brand new on the market revolution. You couldn't ask for better anesthetic, something that wasn't as messy as ether, something that was easier to use, easier for the anesthetist than panthenol. But after the operation, she didn't regain consciousness as she should have done. She slipped instead into a coma. She had an allergic reaction to the brand new on the market revolution. You couldn't ask for better anesthetic, and he destroyed a large part of her liver. Fortunately, the doctors told him the liver was the one organ of the body that could regenerate itself. If they kept her in the intensive care unit, supporting her life processes with machines, the liver would repair itself day by day until eventually she would be well again. She was in intensive care for 5 weeks, at which time the doctors fed all the data from the life support machine into a medico computer, and the computer told them that she was well enough to be moved out of intensive care and into a private room. 11 weeks later, the same computer said she was well enough to go home. She was listless and apathetic, but she agreed that the computer must be right. 2 weeks after she came home, she had relapsed and died within 48 hours. Sometimes he thought that if he had only been a medical doctor instead of a vegetarian, he might have saved her, but that was pointless machinism. What he could have done was demanded that her original surgery be performed with ether or pentanol, something known to be safe, something that had stood the test of decades. He could have told them to stuff their computers up their collective asses, but he hadn't done that either. He had trusted in the technology simply because it was technology, because it was all new. Americans were brought up to respect what was new and progressive, and more often than they wanted to admit, they died for their faith in what was bright and shiny. After Annie died, he became suspicious of technologies, of every new wonder that science gave to mankind. He read Paul Ehrlich and others back to land reformers. Gradually he came to see that the yearly camping trips to Black River could be the beginning of a serious program to free his children from the city, from the ever-growing dangers of the science and technology that the cities represented. The yearly trips became an education for lives. They would live in harmony with nature. But the back to land advocates were possessed by an impossible dream. He saw it as clearly as he had ever seen anything in his life. They were trying to run away from technology, but it moved much faster than they did. There was no land to get back to anymore. The city, its science and technology, the effects of its lifestyle, had tendrils snaking out into even the most remote mountains and forests. Furthermore, you ignore the advanced science at your own peril. His ignorance about anesthetists and the reliability of the mediocre computer had cost Annie her life. His ignorance of subliminal advertising and the research being done in the field had, if you want to stretch a point, cost Mark his life. The only way to survive in the 70s and in the decades to follow was to plunge into the fast-moving, super-technical society, swim with it, learn from it and about it, learn all that you could, and be its equal in any confrontation. He turned away from the window. We can't go to Bexford and call the state police if our own government is behind Salisbury. If our own leaders want to enslave us, we'll never win. It's hopeless. But if it isn't behind him, if he doesn't know what he's achieved, then we don't dare let it know. Because the moment of the military finds out its appropriate Salisbury discoveries, and there are some factions of the military that wouldn't be opposed to using subliminal programming against us. Looking around the books about narcissism, totalitarianism, and mob psychology, thinking ruefully of what he'd learned about some men's lust for power, Sam said, "You're right. Besides, I've been thinking about the problems with the long-distance phone service." Paul knew what he meant. Salisbury taken over the telephone exchange. And if he's done that, Sam said, he's taken other precautions too. He's probably blockaded the roads and every other route out of town. We couldn't go to Bexford until the state police intervened if we still wanted to. We're trapped, Janie said quietly. For the time being, Paul said. That really doesn't matter. We've already decided that there's no place to run anyway. But if he's not working for the government, if he's backed by a corporation or a single wealthy man, maybe we've got a chance to stop him here in Black River. Stop him? Sam stares thoughtfully at the floor. Do you realize what you're saying? We have to get our hands on him, interrogate him, and then kill him. Death is the only thing that will stop a man like that. We'd also have to find out from him who he's associated with and kill anyone else who might understand how the drug was made and how the subliminal program was constructed. He looked up from the floor. That could mean 2 murders, 3, 4, or a dozen. None of us is a killer, Jenny said. Every man's a potential killer, Paul said. When it comes to matters of survival, any man is capable of anything, and this is sure as hell a matter of survival. I kill men in the war, Sam said. So did I, Paul said. A different war than yours, but the same act. That was different, Jenny said. What is? That was war, she said. This is war too, Paul said. She stared at Paul's hand as if imagining them with a knife or a gun or clamming around a man's throat. Sensing her thoughts, he raised his hands and studied them for a moment on occasion, washing his hands before dinner or after treating a sick animal. He would flash back to the war, back to Southeast Asia. He would hear the gun and see the blood again in his memory. In those almost psychic moments, he was both amazed and dismayed that the same hands were accustomed to mundane and horrible acts, that they could heal or endure, make love or kill, and look no different after the task was done. Codified morality, he thought, was indeed a blessing, but also a curse of civilization. A blessing because it permitted men to live in harmony most of the time. A curse because when the laws of nature, and especially of human nature, made it necessary for a man to wound or kill another man in order to save himself and his family, it spawned remorse and guilt, even if the violence was unwanted and unavoidable. Besides, he reminded himself, these are the 70s. This is the age of science and technology, when a man often is required to act with the implacable and unemotional savagery of the machine. For better or worse, in these times, gentility is becoming less and less a sign of the civilized man and is in fact very nearly an obsolescent quality. You see gentility most often in those who are least likely to survive wave after wave of future shock. Lowering his hand, he said, in the classic paranoid vein, it's us against it, except that this isn't a delusion or illusion, it's real. Jenny seemed to accept the need for murder as quickly as he had accepted the fact that he might be called upon to commit it. By this point in life, she had experience and had all but the most gentle. Has had all but the most gentle people, at least the flickering of a homicidal urge in a moment of despair or great frustration. She hadn't accepted it as the solution to whatever problem had inspired it, but she was not incapable of conceiving of a situation in which homicide was the most reasonable response to a threat, in spite of the overprotected, sheltered upbringing of which she spoke last Monday. She could adapt to even the most unpleasant truths. Perhaps, Paul thought, the ordeal with her first husband had made her stronger, tougher, and more resilient than she realized. She said, even if we could bring ourselves to kill in order to stop this thing, well, it's still too much. To stop Salisbury, I need to know more about him. And how do we learn anything? He's got hundreds of bodyguards, or if he wants, he can turn everyone in town into killers and send them after us. Do we just sit here, pass the time, wait for him to stop around for a chat? Returning the hardboard volumes of essays to the shelf from which he'd taken the Sam said, wait a minute, suppose he faced them. He was excited. All 3 of them were tense, twisted, as tight as watch springs. But now a glimmer of pleasurable excitement was in his Santa Claus-like feature. When Salisbury saw Raya standing in the kitchen doorway at the Thorpe's house, what do you imagine he did? Very first thing, grab for her, Jenny said. Wrong. Bitterly, Paul said, ordered Bob to kill her. Not that either. Remember, he would expect her to be another one of his zombies. Sucking in her breast, Jenny said, we would use the code phrase on her, the system he talked about in the article. He tried to open her up and take control of her before she ran away, so Raya must have heard the code phrase. And if she can recall that, Sam said, it will all have control of everyone in Black River, the same as Salisbury. He won't be able to send them after us. He won't have hundreds of bodyguards to hide behind. It won't be us against them. It'll be us against him. Thanks for listening.